Welcome to this edition of the webinar for calibration and asset management for ISO and FDA compliance. So we'll get started. And before we get started, I just wanted to give a little bit about my background. So currently, I'm serving as Vice President of Quality and Compliance Solutions at Quality Systems. So we do software solutions for QMS functions, including calibration and asset management. And I have more than 20 years of experience in quality management and quality engineering fields. And in the agenda, we'll cover three main sections um, as we described in the invite. In the first part, we'll discuss or understand the ISO and FDA requirements and how we can create solutions to meet those requirements. And in the second part, we'll look at some of the automated solutions available that can be used to effectively manage the calibration and asset records. And in the third part, we'll discuss some of the very basic statistical concepts in the calibration management. So in the first part, as I mentioned, let's look at some of the requirements in the ISO and FDA regulations for the calibration and asset management. So here is a screenshot of the requirements from ISO 9001 2015. So we have similar requirements for ISO 13485 as well. I will not go into the details, but regarding the calibration and asset management, the organization will determine and provide resources necessary to ensure reliable and valid results. And most important thing is the organization shall retain documented information for calibration and preventative maintenance records. Previously, the documented informations were being used as the calibration records. And also, when the calibration is being done, we have to make sure that the calibration standards are traceable to NIST or international standards. When no such standards exist, we have to establish the basis for the calibrations. And one of the key requirements is that when the equipments are found to be out of tolerance, mostly if it is a piece of equipment that's used for measurements, and we have to make sure that the previous measurement results have not been impacted. So we have to do some investigations and we have to keep records. We'll discuss in more details how to handle the out of tolerance records. And here is the section from 21 CFR Part 20, Part 820.70, Production and Process Controls. So when we are using equipments for production and process controls, we have requirements to make sure that those equipments used in the manufacturing process meets the specified requirements and is appropriately designed, constructed, placed, and installed to facilitate the maintenance and adjustment. So we'll cover in more detail in the next slides. Just letting you know that we also have requirements for the maintenance schedules, and also requirements for the inspection of these production and process equipment, and also requirements for adjustment if we are making any adjustment for the production and process equipment. So here regarding the production and process equipment, so as a requirement for the manufacturing process or the production process, we want to make sure that the equipment that are used are properly designed, constructed, and installed. What that means is that most of the manufacturing companies or life science companies do not design and construct their own equipments. Only in exceptional cases, sometimes if there is an IP issues or unique technical reasons, but most of the times, manufacturing companies, including medical device or life science companies, select proper equipments made by someone else. Most of the times, these vendors or the suppliers for those equipments provide services that include installation qualification and operational qualifications. They also provide services for, like, if you would need IQ protocols and IQ reports. They also provide services on site IQ and OQ services. But most of the time, it's the responsibility of the manufacturing company to implement the performance qualifications. This step is intended to confirm that the operating equipment is capable of producing desired output. That means your product characteristics are met under the normal operating conditions. Um, in the second part, like we have to establish and execute the maintenance schedule for the production and process equipments. The life science companies are required to establish the schedules for the preventative maintenance. And regarding the record creation and retention, so the date of completions and details of the activity completed and the individual who did the maintenance are to be documented. Also, for the inspection of the production and process equipment, we need to have a schedule, and we need to execute these schedules, and the inspection results needs to be properly documented, and the date of completions and details of the activity completed and the individual who completed the inspection are to be documented. Here is the second part. Section 820.72 defines the requirements for the inspections, measuring, and test equipments. So we'll go in detail in the next slides, but this is a summary of the requirements when we are using equipments for inspections and measurements. So those equipment needs to be suitable for intended purpose and is capable of producing valid results. And those equipments needs to be routinely calibrated, inspected, checked, and maintained. And we also need, for the calibration, we need to define the limits of accuracy and precision, so that we can say the calibration results is acceptable or not acceptable. And regarding the calibration standards, as I mentioned earlier, we need to have standards which can be traceable to NIST or other international standards. And also we need to keep the calibration records, which defines the date of calibrations, individual performing the calibrations, and when is the next due date for the calibration. So let's go into more detail into individual sections. So we divided into two parts for the control of inspection, measuring, and test equipments. The first part is the selections of the equipment, so which is similar to the production and process requirements. I would not go into the details, but this is usually handled using the IQ, OQ, and PQ requirements. IQ is your installation qualification, OQ is your operational qualification, PQ is your performance qualifications. So those things needs to be implemented properly to address the first part, which is the selection, design, construction, and installation of the equipment. Second part is that each manufacturer shall establish and maintain procedure to ensure that the equipment is routinely calibrated, inspected, checked, and maintained. So the second part can be addressed through the implementations of the calibration schedule and calibration procedures. So the schedule needs to be executed as per plan. So if there is any deviation in the schedule, then you need to have a deviation records to make sure that the adverse impacts have been evaluated and documented. And details of the calibration procedure needs to be created when calibration work is being done internally. If your calibration work is outsourced, so you need to have proper supply qualifications for those outsourced companies. Most of the times, manufacturing companies, even including life science companies, outsource the calibration work to other service providers. So you have to make sure that those service providers are properly qualified as per your supplier qualifications procedure. And when you get the calibration results or the calibration certificate from outside vendors, you have to review it, make sure that those calibration results or the certificates meet your internal requirements for accuracy and precision of those equipments. The other part is the calibration procedures shall include specific directions and limits for accuracy and precision. If the limits are not met, there shall be provisions for remedial action to establish the limits and evaluate whether there was any adverse impact on device quality. So what this section is referring, when there is a calibration results found to be out of tolerance, outside your spec limits for accuracy and precision. So in those cases, you shall create procedure for handling the out of tolerance results for calibrations. When equipment calibration results fail, you need to create out of tolerance reports. Most of the times we have seen like creating a CAPA records, corrective and preventative action reports. It definitely helps so that you can document the investigation results. And we have seen like if you are using some kind of automated solutions, it's easy to do the reverse traceability. We'll discuss in another sections. But it's easier to find out in how many places this failed piece of equipment have been used and what action needs to be taken. So yeah, this is what I was referring to when you have an out of tolerance conditions. This can result from failure of calibration results, and the impact of failed calibration results on the released product needs to be investigated. Immediate correction and corrective actions needs to be implemented. It's highly recommended to do a CAPA risk assessment and make sure if the risk is high, then depending on your CAPA procedure, a corrective and preventative actions needs to be opened, and the failure results should be investigated and documented properly. So in this section, it defines the requirements for the calibration standards. So the calibration standards which are used for inspections, measuring and test equipments shall be traceable to national and international standards. If the national or international standards are not practical or available, we have to establish independent reproducible standards. As I mentioned earlier, it's make sure that the standards that are being used by your service providers are traceable to NIST. And in rare cases, there may be, there may be failure of the standard itself. These are very challenging situations, but it does happen. So you should be prepared in case if a reference standard that's used for calibration of equipment failed. And you should have options, or you should have the capability to do a reverse traceability, which means you should be able to run reports and find out which pieces of equipment have been calibrated using that failed standards. And if the reference standard failed, potentially the calibration results are invalid. And the equipments that, if it is a measurement equipment, potentially that could have been used for releasing hundreds, even thousands of lots of products. So it's a very serious risk, but it can happen, and we need to be prepared for that. Calibration records. In this section, it defines the identification of the calibration records and the person performing the calibration work and when is the next calibration due. And we need to create calibration labels that uniquely defines the ID of the equipment, when was the last time the calibration was done, when is the next calibration due date. And after the calibration work is completed, it's highly recommended to have the reviewers review the results and sign off, making sure that there has not been any inaccuracy. And it's always recommended and it's required that we have to maintain documents which are auditable and traceable at all the time. So let's move on to the second part. So in this part we'll see how you can use some of the automated solutions that can make the management of calibration and asset record simple and easy. So, there are lots of challenges when you are using manual records or the paper records. But if you're using an automated solutions, potentially like a computerized calibration management programs, so you can create a calibration records or you can set up schedules. So once the records is created and your calibration work is completed, so you can route it for review and approvals. And after that, you can store the records, and the closed records can be easily accessed for performance monitoring and audit purpose. Because what happens when you have manual records, it's very challenging to run any reports on the metrics. If you have electronics records, you can quickly download to Excel, or you can run the reports and see how many calibration works are coming off due next month. And if you have completed the records and you are in audit, you can easily go back and open the calibration record for those instruments or the equipments as required by your auditor. And also, it's very challenging. We have seen like setting up a schedule, making sure that the schedule is implemented in a timely manner. So if you have missed calibrating a piece of equipment as per the schedule, potentially you have created a deviations. So in that case, you would need to create a deviations and document the justifications for the adverse impacts or the results that may have caused. So to make life much simpler, it's the automated options help, and it's sends you reminders before the calibration comes due, and even when you are overdue, it also sends you reminders. Also, like calibration templates, when you are using paper copies of the forms for recording calibration templates, we have seen like someone forgets to enter the data, or the record has not been reviewed. So there is a potential for a lot of inconsistencies. So the automated solution help you to enter the data in the exact formats, and the results can be also calculated automatically. Also, we have seen like built-in audit trails and e-signatures makes the compliance easy. So if you have a solution that's 21 CFR Part 11 compliance, it's easy to comply with the FDA requirements. Here is an example to show you the calculations for accuracy and precision. So if you have automated solutions, it can easily calculate the values for accuracy and precision, and also it compares against your set of specs for accuracy and precision, so that you look at only the results, whether this piece of equipment passed calibration or failed calibrations. So in this part, let's look at some of the very basic statistical concepts used in the calibration management. So we would look at very high levels, some of the terms that are used and what that means for the calibration work. As you can see in this picture, it's a visual representations of what is accuracy and what is precision. So the first one, when it's very accurate and precise, you would see all your results coming very close, and they're at the center of your spec or the measurement. And sometimes you may have very close results when you are doing the calibration work. The results are coming very close, but they are not at the center. So in this case, something has happened to your equipment, and that equipment needs to be adjusted so that you come back to your previous status, which is always you are looking for calibration results which are very precise and very accurate. Sometimes if the equipment is old or malfunctioning, so you can have still accurate but imprecise. Like, you can have measurement results all over the place, but when you do the average, it still comes at the center. So that's why it's accurate but not precise. And in these cases, the worst case scenario where it's not accurate nor precise. So this is a qualitative descriptions of the accuracy and precisions. So let's look at some of the statistical formulas that are used for calculating accuracy and precision. So for calculation of accuracy, I have seen, like, most of the times people are using the formula. They would compare the average of the measurements to the target, and you find the percentage difference with respect to the targets. That's a pretty good estimations of the accuracy, and most of the companies are using it. There are different ways for measuring the accuracy, but most of the calibration service providers use this formula to document to give you the results for the accuracy. And this is the standard average to calculate the average of the measurement results. You take sum of the measurements and divide by the number of measurements, so that gives you the average value. And this is the formula that you would put in the average value here, and your target, so you can calculate your percentage accuracy or percentage bias. And here are some of the statistical formulas that are used for measuring the precision of test equipments. So either you can use your standard deviations. Here is the statistical formula to calculate the standard deviations, and also there is another formula. If you are using control chart, you can calculate the standard deviation using this formula. But most of the calibration service providers I have seen, they're using using a measure called coefficient of variability, or percentage CV. They just calculate the standard deviations and divide that by the average of the results. So that's a pretty good measure of variability, but not necessarily that's the best measure of precision. Also, some of the companies have limits for the range, like what should be the max value and what should be the minimum value permitted, or what should be the difference between the max value and minimum value. So these are some of the measures of the precision, and for advanced levels, you may look at gauge repeatability and reproducibility values, or control charts to look at the precision, or how precise these measurements are coming up. Here is an example, the example I gave you before, where I'm using the same examples. So in this example, you can see that the calibration data failed the precisions, but it passed the accuracy. As you can see, the accuracy results, which is the percentage difference, here is all pass, and the precision, which is calculated using percentage CV, which is your standard deviations over average, has failed. So if I look at visually what that means, you can see that the results are all over the place, but when I do the average, they're coming pretty close to the center. So that's why the accuracy results are acceptable or pass, but the precision results are fail. And here is just a screenshot I wanted to give you, show you. We at Quality Systems, we provide solutions for calibration and asset management. So we have options for tracking the equipments or the instruments that are used, and also the calibrations and preventative maintenance and out of tolerance that may be required. You would need to create and use for your equipments. I would not go into the details, but just wanted to show you that we provide solutions that can be used for easily managing the assets and the calibration records. And the solution for the asset and calibration management includes user management options, so you can have users registered in the system, and you can give different permissions to the users. And once your equipment is registered, you can manage and control your regular activities, which is creating, reviewing, and storing of the calibration and PM records, and also out of tolerance records. And here are just a list of capabilities available in the calibration and asset management solutions. I will not go into the details. I'll send you the slides. You can take a look. And here is our contact information in case if you need additional information. You can give us a call or you can send us an email. And that's all I had for today.